Breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, no policy matters more than lockdown after the 2 years of destruction we've suffered through. So thank goodness for the woman who did what no journalist wanted to do. Brilliant woman, actually, by asking Liz Truss this at last night's Tory hustings.
Can I just ask you if you would ever authorise another lockdown?
No, I wouldn't.
Music to my ears, but why the hell are the usual suspects claiming Truss was wrong to make such a statement? I'll explain why this is a critical commitment from any perspective PM in my digest next, before my superstar panel give their view. Tonight, I'm joined by former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, esteemed political journalist John Sargent, and journalist and author Amy Nicole. The political and media establishment had Truss in their crosshairs today as her campaign was forced into its first U-turn. But could her controversial plan to slash public sector salaries have been an ingenious way to cut Westminster waste? We'll debate the merits of her Axe policy at 10:30. Someone who's certainly brought into Truss's aspirational vision for Britain as Tory MP and whirlwind Education Secretary Michelle Donnellan, who helped bring down the PM when she quit after just 35 hours. She'll explain what impressed her about the true blue candidate and reveal whether she believes ousting Boris was still the right move for her party. Don't miss that at 9:50. Is Truss right that the next Prime Minister should just ignore the attention-seeking Nicola Sturgeon? I've assembled a team of political masterminds from both sides of the border to debate that in the clash at 9:25. Elsewhere on the show, as bin Laden's terrorist successor is finally killed, how will Prince Charles recover from allegedly taking money from the 9/11 mastermind's family? Britain's favourite Nigel tackles our future king's latest charity cash scandal and the damage his perpetually poor judgment is doing to the royal family. That's in What the Farage at 9:40. From Liev, with love, father of two, Tony Garnett, made headlines around the world when he dumped his partner of 8 years for, wait for it, the Ukrainian refugee the couple had generously opened their family home to. Now, the star-crossed lovers at the centre of this bitter love triangle join me live in the studio for an exclusive interview about their astonishing love affair. That's at 10:20. After the Lionesses inspired the nation by bringing football home and the Rugby Football Union banned trans athletes from events, are women on the verge of winning their fight for fairness in sport? Former Team GB marathon star Mari Yamauchi has bravely spoken out in defence of biological female athletes. She's uncancelled at 10:40. Sticking with sport, as the return of the Premier League beckons, club captains have decided to quit virtue signalling and voted against taking the knee this season, we're told. So are they right to show divisive gesture politics the red card? Plus, Oasis star Noel Gallagher received an unwelcome serenade on his holiday this week. Oh my goodness, let me tell you, he's completely mortified. Guess when you're a rock and roll star, though, you've just got to roll with it right now. We'll tackle all that and more in the Media Buzz from 10. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press. And as ever, new Greatest Britain in Union jackass revealed just before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Now, I don't like to see anyone cancelled or forced into a pathetic Twitter meltdown for expressing something that is considered anti-woke or a little bit un-PC, but wouldn't offend a single soul down the pub. However, when that man in question is the BBC's virtue signaller-in-chief, Gary Lineker, who spends all day doing just that to others, I'll admit, I feel a little bit smug about it, actually. I'm, of course, referring to Lineker's so-called sexist tweet following the Lionesses' victory, where he wrote, "The Lionesses have only gone and done it, and Kelly is England's heroine, bra none." Cue howls of outrage from all the online bores who are usually on his side, branding the tweet and Lineker misogynist and accusing him of casual sexism, even after he pathetically deleted the words in question. You reap what you sow, Mr. Lineker, and this is the culture you've created, a culture where we can't even use a funny pun anymore. Now, we're going to have the leadership latest in my digest next, then my superstar panel weigh in. First look at them. Former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, is here. Political journalist John Sargent back too, and so too the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. But first, the news headlines at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News tonight. The hospital treating Archie Battersby says they'll begin to withdraw life support tomorrow morning. The 12-year-old boy has been in a coma since April after an accident took place at home. He's been declared brainstem dead by doctors. 3 judges refused to postpone the withdrawal of his treatment and also refused permission to appeal against their ruling. Archie's mother, Holly Dance, described the hospital's actions as cruel and said she's heartbroken.
Archie's my child. It shouldn't be down to other people to decide where he takes his last breath and if he lives or dies. It's wrong. He's on 3 medications. He's absorbing feed. He's gained weight. That's on record. He's gained weight. You know, it's definitely not what they're putting over to the court, but the court aren't prepared to listen or allow us to have independent specialists in. There's not really much more I can do.
Archie's mum. Now, in other news today, a man who was arrested for carrying a crossbow in the grounds of Windsor Castle has been charged under the Treason Act. Police say Jaswant Singh Chail from Southampton is accused of intending to injure or alarm the Queen. The 20-year-old was intercepted on Christmas Day last year. He'll appeal in court later this month. BP has reported a profit of nearly £7 billion for the second quarter, its biggest in 14 years. And that's at the same time as UK households are hit by rising oil and gas prices, with inflation at its highest in 40 years. A consultancy firm has warned energy bills could reach more than £3,600 per household this winter. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week, affecting domestic and European flights. BA says the move is in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Last month, the airport announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers until at least mid-September. Police have issued an arrest warrant for the older brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. Ismail Abedi, who fled the UK last summer, failed to attend the public inquiry into the 2017 attack at Manchester Magistrates Court today. Last month, he also failed to comply with the inquiry, and he faces a jail term of up to 51 weeks if he's captured or if he hands himself in. Now, there was a royal treat at the Commonwealth Games today as Princess Charlotte joined her parents in Birmingham. 7-year-old Charlotte accompanied the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to learn about preparing the next generation of sportsmen and women for future events. England are currently second in the medals table on day 5 with 27 gold and 27 silver medals as well. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're watching GB News, where now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
How typical that the most important question Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak could be asked during this entire leadership campaign. It didn't come from an MSM journalist or TV presenter. They no longer seem to ask the questions that really matter. Instead, it was from a member of the public at last night's Conservative Party hustings in Exeter. Watch.
Can I just ask you if you would ever authorise another lockdown?
No. No, I wouldn't.
Do you think lockdown was a bad idea?
Well, every single chance I was given the opportunity to express a view, I was on the favour of doing less rather than more on lockdowns and opening up the economy earlier. The fact is I wasn't part of the key COVID committee. I was the International Trade Secretary. I was spending my time trying to get all these trade deals done.
That answer is confirmation of what I've known for the past 2 years. Liz Truss was not in favour of the devastating COVID lockdowns that destroyed our economy and trampled all over our civil liberties. Think about virtually every crisis this country is currently facing. The cost of living hell, labour shortages, the NHS backlog, an education deficit and a mental health epidemic, to name just a few. All of them have their roots in the completely ludicrous and unnecessary way the Western world followed China into totalitarian lockdowns for COVID, with the establishment and globalist elite then convincing themselves it was the right decision. Given the seismic consequences of a lockdown policy, which was never part of our pandemic policy, you must agree with me that it's strange. It's never virtually mentioned, ever, by the media or the ruling class. It makes me so goddamn angry that not one journalist at any of the TV debates or hustings even asked one question about the lockdown policy until that brilliant woman raised the elephant in the room last night. No policy matters more. No policy has destroyed our finances in this way or destroyed so many lives. The reason they don't want to discuss the growing proof that lockdowns are the biggest public health policy of all time is because it shows just how wrong they were. Wrong to destroy children's education for 2 years. Wrong to deny folk the chance to sit with loved ones as they took their last breath on earth. Wrong to cancel weddings. Wrong to shutter businesses. Wrong to discourage treatment of non-COVID conditions. I will say, in fairness, Rishi Sunak was also one of the more lockdown-sceptical senior cabinet ministers. But as Chancellor, he only stepped in to stop restrictions being introduced over Omicron, which was in December.
Flew back to this country to stop us sleepwalking into a national lockdown, because we were hours away from a press conference that was going to lock this country down again because of Omicron, and I came back and fought very hard against the system because I believe that would be the wrong thing for this country, with all the damage it would have done to businesses, to children's education, to people's lives. No, but
that was great. Absolutely. Well done on that, Mr. Sunak. But I would say it was also too little too late by December 2021. I'm also concerned, I will admit, that the lockdown zealots of the current administration, like, Matt Hancock and Michael Gove and Sajid Javid, are far more likely to secure roles under Sunak as Prime Minister. Today I've heard all the usual suspects say that Truss has been irresponsible to make such a blanket statement. Wrong. She would have been irresponsible not to. That doesn't mean there can't be responsible public health messaging if there's another virus. But now we know the consequences. Locking the British public in their homes by law should not be viewed as a solution to anything. But to respond now, my superstar panel. Former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. The political journalist, John Sargent, and the author and broadcaster, Amy Nicole. I mean, Dawn, first up, I just think it is a complete disgrace that it took a Conservative Party member in Exeter to ask the most important question of the campaign.
I totally agree, and I just don't understand why anyone in any press conference ever never asked the questions. The whole country was screaming at the TV. We had 2 years of lockdown, 2 years of those press conferences from hell, and no one asked the questions. Everyone was asking at home. Literally wanted to punch your telly when they were doing that, didn't they? So, I mean, fair play to that lady who did ask that question, but I would have asked it. It's the one thing I think we all want. Look, can she reassure it? Can she ever say that? She can't really. We all know that realistically, because none of us know what's around the corner, so she can't really...
Well, she can, actually.
She can say it, but she might not be able to do it.
Well, it depends if she has the bravery, John, to stare down the public health establishment in a way that, sadly, Boris Johnson, who you know I'm a big supporter of, but sadly he wasn't able to stare them down, even though he wanted to back in March 2020. Because actually, if you look at Sweden, where they took the approach that we should have taken in the UK, they did far better than us.
Yeah, but no politician in Britain could face down the medical establishment. That's just not possible.
Well, they might have to.
No, but
they should.
No, but the key point, which I think you're missing down in all this, is that this is, broadly speaking, a medical scientific question. Now, in America, all these things have become politicised, and it's a pretty grim situation, too, where you say to someone, what's your view about COVID? No, by the way, are you a Democrat or Republican? What a position to be in when you've got these superb scientists who are trying to get it right. And the idea...
They're not superb. The vast majority of them are not superb.
But there are some of them who are superb. They did invent a vaccine, and whatever else you say about the lockdowns slowed down the spread of the virus.
Well,
now, you can't deny that.
It's highly questionable.
It's questionable.
John, if you look at every lockdown, if you look at every lockdown, the cases were peaking before we went into lockdown. And by the way, John, what happened when we didn't lock down over Christmas? It was great, wasn't it? And who was saying that we should lock down?
I know.
Neil Ferguson,
Dan, the point...
Christopher Whitty, Van Tam, all the usual suspects wanted us locked in our homes. The Christmas just been. So we have to stand up to these lunatics.
So you think if there's another pandemic and people do not know what the cause of it is, what the nature of the virus is. So for hundreds of years now, people have known what you do is you isolate.
Wait a moment. There has never been lockdowns by law.
All right, but quarantines, isolation, of course there have been by law. During the Great Plague, they made absolutely sure that people couldn't move out of their villages and things. The only way you can do it at the beginning, when you don't know anything about it, hundreds of people are dying. In fact, in this case, in the recent years, thousands of people are dying. So the idea that you take a cool view, overriding the science...
This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the policy position of folk like me.
No, I know.
Because what it's doing is assuming that I wanted everyone out socialising in the same way that they would have before. All I want is a measured, voluntary response which is based on guidance rather than law, because that is the only way that we can live in a free society.
You think in this very complicated area of science and medicine, you somehow have the absolute answer and you're convinced that you're right.
No, but John, they got it wrong. They got it wrong.
All right, but the idea that you would have been right and that if you were in charge...
Do you appreciate, John, that the mistakes of that lengthy lockdown are why we are facing this absolute disastrous cost of lockdown crisis now?
With hindsight, of course you can go over it. But the idea that people would say, that Dan Wootton, you know, is he Dr. Wootton or is he Professor Wootton? I can't remember right, but he's got the answer. That's just, nobody would have behaved
I'm sorry,
like
the professors didn't have the answer either, John. And by the way, I never wanted lockdowns, and I was very clear, and I've said it on the public record right back at the start of March 2020 that I think
you're a medical genius. So you're a medical genius.
No, I have an opinion, and I'm allowed to have an opinion when we're being locked in our homes by law, because I believe in civil liberties. But I was prepared to follow the first lockdown because I trusted these scientists. And actually, so I locked myself in the house for the first month, and then I wrote my first column starting to question the lockdown, the efficacy of the lockdown, in late April, May 2020. So I did listen to the experts to begin with. But here's the thing, John, they were wrong. Because we were told that it was going to be 3 weeks to flatten the curve, and then 2 years later we were still under restrictions.
Say that all experts are always wrong then. From what you've said, the argument now is don't trust an expert because he's bound to be wrong.
No, John, it depends who the expert is. It depends who the expert is, John, because if you look at Neil Ferguson, there was a raft of evidence to say he had got it wrong on mad cow disease, he had got it wrong on swine flu. So why was this bloke advising our government when he'd got it wrong on every single pandemic? Amy Nicole.
You should have listened to him a bit earlier, because the main problem was locking down 3 weeks too late. We did everything 3 weeks too late.
Amy, you genuinely still believe that? You have been brainwashed. You genuinely think if we locked down the country...
Why did I say this?
Amy,
can I just say...
No, Amy, just listen to me. You genuinely believe now, when China is still in lockdown, when New Zealand has highest COVID cases in the world, pretty much, you still believe if we'd gone into lockdown 3 weeks earlier, this virus would have just gone away and everything would have been fine. That is delusional.
Dan, let me finish the point, OK? That's just my little starter there. Thank you, John, for being on this panel, because you're talking absolute beautiful sense. I think you've literally proved the politicisation of this topic by your reaction to the tiny little snippet I said there. So what I would have liked...
Sorry that I'm triggered by this.
You are wonderful, Amy. I didn't realise just how good you were until a couple of minutes ago.
Nice to meet you too. But what I wish Liz Truss had been asked, amongst other things, such as how are you going to deal with the cost of living, are you going to give us any childcare, are you going to sort out the NHS, is... Did you call to protect the care homes early? The main problem with the whole approach to the pandemic was not protecting the vulnerable. We spent nothing.
Completely agree with that.
We put all our attention.
100% agree with that.
100% I am not completely in favour.
And I'm not just saying this though to defend Liz Truss, but she was the International Trade Secretary, so care homes and social care did not come under her brief. That was the responsibility of Matt Hancock, and you know when he sat at that table and I grilled him for an hour on it, that it was very clear that there were serious deficiencies in our government response when it came to care homes, and I agree, that was the main issue at the start.
That is the main issue, but
and that's what caused all of the deaths.
If you're going to say, are we
not
going to
all
lock
of the
down
deaths.
again?
Sorry, that's what caused
for Liz Truss to sit and say, no, there's never going to be another lockdown. She's either being dishonest or stupid, which proves that she really is the Boris continua. Because that exists straight from the Boris Johnson playbook.
Were you listening to James O'Brien this morning? I heard him say the exact same thing.
Really? Because I actually wasn't this morning. It's fantastic. She was pandering to a room of her fans.
With your hero.
She's playing to the gallery.
No,
completely.
even I agree. I think she can't promise that. No one can promise it. Sensibly, no one can promise it.
Actually, I completely disagree, because in January 2020, any Western political leader in the world would have been able to promise their citizens that they wouldn't be locked down for a virus. And you know what my fear is? If we don't get tough on this, the next time there's a little threat of swine flu or some new disease coming from China, which, by the way, we deal with all the time, the entire world will end up locked down because we have these hysterical...
Wait a moment, Dan. Can I just make this gentle point, Dan? Liz Truss was in the cabinet.
Yeah.
She was a leading member of the cabinet. They prided themselves at the time how united they were in their response to COVID. So everything we were told during this period there was no question of course, Liz Truss. Secretly, she's against... And she,
you know
she says, I wasn't really a core part of that COVID decision-making. How convenient.
Well, she did make a good point, though, which is that they had this little COVID subcommittee, and she said all of the decisions were brought to Cabinet as a fait accompli, which they were. I will say, though, the man that I would like in charge of the country, unfortunately he's in the House of Lords, he couldn't run, is Lord Frost, the only cabinet minister who resigned based on the government's lockdown strategy. The only cabinet minister.
Do you know what this whole thing is to me? It's like she got a little bit drunk at a wedding and she was like, I want to buy champagne for everyone, because she was overexcited and she just wanted to say what everyone in that room wanted to hear. And she succeeded, because look how excited you are.
Playing to the gallery.
Oh, do you know what? I'm not excited, because I know what she's going to have to face if this ever does happen, and she will have to face down the entire mainstream media, the health establishment, virtually every politician, and it probably will be impossible.
Me and John.
We're going. John Sargent, Dawn News, my superstar panel, and they're here all night. But coming up, as Bin Laden's terrorist successor is finally killed, will Prince Charles be able to recover from reports of receiving money from the 9/11 mastermind's family? Britain's favourite Nigel weighs in on our future king's latest charity cash scandal and what the Farage at 9:40. But first, Another Liz Truss scandal from the hustings. Is she right that the next Prime Minister should just ignore the attention-seeking Nicola Sturgeon? My political mastermind's battling it out tonight. Former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan, political pundit James Melville and political commentator Emma Webb. They're going to take on former Scottish editor for the Daily Telegraph Alan Cochrane, the journalist and author Amy Epstein too. And as ever, I want to know what you think. Email me down at gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @GBNews. There's a poll up there now too. The results in just 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Nigel Farage is on the way in just a few minutes, but it's time now for The Clash. As you heard in my digest tonight, Tory leadership hopeful Liz Truss last night sent SNP members into meltdown after branding Nicola Sturgeon an attention seeker and claiming she would ignore her as Prime Minister watch.
And I think the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is ignore her. I think she's...
First Minister. She's got a democratically elected position just as you would.
I'm sorry, she's an attention seeker, Sam. That's what she is.
This morning, Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg doubled down on those comments.
What we need to do is to hold Ms Sturgeon to account for the failings of the Scottish Government to deliver services for the people of Scotland. And when she's waffling on endlessly about having a referendum and going to the Supreme Court and all of this, we need to be saying, hold on, you're doing this because you are failing to deliver for the people of Scotland, and the United Kingdom government will have to deliver for the people of Scotland as well. So I think she's very often wrong. She's always moaning, and that we need to focus on how the union benefits people.
Scheming Sturgeon an attention seeker, according to Liz Truss? Oh, yes, she is.
Who should be making those decisions? People here in Scotland or governments we don't vote for at Westminster?
Our future will be more secure as an independent nation. I don't think it will surprise anybody to hear my view that the office of Prime Minister would be greatly enhanced by Boris Johnson's departure from it. I abided by the rules in place there. I wore a face covering on the train to London and the train back. Don't re-elect Trump at any point.
Sturgeon's lackeys were, of course, quick to jump to her defence today. Deputy First Minister John Swinney branded Truss obnoxious and claimed voters in Scotland would be absolutely horrified by her, quote, completely and utterly unacceptable comments. The statement also sparked concern among some Tories, with Theresa May's former Chief of Staff, Gavin Barwell, tweeting, "Unionists need a plan to change some of their minds rather than sticking our fingers in our ears and saying, we can't hear you." So what do you think? Is Liz Truss right that the next Prime Minister should ignore attention-seeking Sturgeon? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. Go and vote in our Twitter poll while you're there, and I'll bring you those results shortly. But first, to debate this, I'm joined by my political mastermind tonight, former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan, political writer and pundit James Melville, former Scottish editor for the Daily Telegraph Alan Cochrane, journalist and author Angela Epstein, and political commentator Emma Webb. Now, look, here's the thing, Austin Sheridan. Right, I'm going to come to you first as the SNP representative here. There's a big difference between ignoring Nicola Sturgeon and ignoring Scotland. Of course, Liz Truss won't ignore Scotland. She is the Prime Minister of the country. But I think she should ignore scheming Sturgeon when Sturgeon doesn't even plan to follow the law anymore.
Well, in actual fact, Nicola Sturgeon does intend to follow the letter of the law. That is why it's been taken to the Supreme Court to decide on what should happen.
She knows it's against the law, Austin.
Taking the correct path, making sure that we're fully law-abiding. And Nicola Sturgeon is the elected head of government in Scotland. That is the reality of it. So if you are not going to take into account the views that the people of Scotland have expressed in electing Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister, of course it's disrespectful to the people of Scotland. But we all know that what Liz Truss was saying in the debate last night was all bluster. It was just pandering to her Tory audience. But I'll tell you what, though, it did give us a great insight to the utter contempt that the Tories show towards devolution and how people in Scotland vote. They just plan to ignore us. So if that's
Alan Cochrane
to save the union, I'm up for it.
Alan Cochrane, is that the risk of Sturgeon's comments, that you'll get the SNP saying exactly what Austin just said?
No. I mean, I find this very amusing. I mean, the SNP they're in the intensive care unit at the SNP about their plans for independence. They haven't got a hope in hell of getting either their India F2 or any success out of it. The idea that anything that Liz Truss has said is damaging the SNP's case, they're already in deep trouble. And what we must remember is Nicola, I'm sorry we keep using first name, we're all on pals up here. The idea that this is an insult to Scotland. This is Nicola portraying herself again as Mother Scotland. This was a pure political spat between two politicians, big girls with good, tough policies to sell. Liz Truss and Nicola Sturgeon. The idea that Nicola will lie awake at night worrying about this, the only thing she'll worry about is can she get on the telly tomorrow morning?
Well, exactly, because Angela Epstein, I mean, Sturgeon is playing politics all the time. Even when she congratulated the Lionesses on the Sunday, she felt the need to play identity politics. So is this not just Truss playing her at her own game?
Not really. I think what Liz Truss is sort of suggesting, not that I agree with the pejorative way that she said it, I think she is better than that because it sounded terribly bitchy. But I think what she's saying is that while Nicola Sturgeon continues to be a single issue politician, then there's nothing to listen to. If she's not going to talk about or will be distracted by the prospect of trying to get a referendum and won't talk about record waiting lists in A&E in Scotland or the attainment gap, the poor educational services that need addressing and all the other social issues that prevail in Scotland, and instead completely is consumed by the idea of having another referendum, then what is there to listen to? It happened in 2014. It was supposed to be a once-in-a-generation vote, and Nicola Sturgeon is like the toddler who won't go to bed. However much you tell her that it's bedtime, she won't listen.
Yes.
I mean, she enjoyed being a statesman and having all that statesmanship during the pandemic.
Yes, she loved being on the TV every day.
She loved that. the social distancing, the lockdown went on longer, and there was no discernible difference in Omicron cases and Delta cases there were in the rest of the UK. She loves the stage, but she has to be ignored if all she will talk about is a referendum that simply cannot happen.
Yeah, I mean, James Melville, I'm sorry. She said it was a once-in-a-generation referendum. She knows her proposal is against the law. So, actually, why should Liz Truss do anything other than ignore her when it comes to Indy Ref 2?
Oh, it's much more existential than that, Dan. It's about democracy. It's about freedom, of which you're a champion of freedom.
You had your vote. You had your vote. You can't keep having votes, James, until you get your way. It's not how it works.
Circumstances have changed because a number of things have come down the track since the last one. We're looking at in terms of the will of the people in Scotland, in terms of Brexit. They voted very, very differently. Also, in terms of the response to COVID, you've got different economic conditions. Now, whether it's a yes vote or a no vote next time, it's up to the will of the people to decide. It's a bit rich coming from Liz Truss, who's about to try and become Prime Minister based on 200,000 votes from Tory members, giving a lecture to Nicola Sturgeon, who I'm not much of a fan of, by the way, but I am a fan about democracy and about freedom and the right for citizens in a country to choose their own fate. I think it's time for another referendum. And if it's a no vote, that will actually settle things, I think, for quite a long time, because circumstances have changed since the last one. It's up to the people of Scotland to decide, not Liz Truss, who's on a bogus premise, false premise of democracy, to try and become Prime Minister based on 200,000 Tory members' votes. So that's a bit rich coming from her.
Emma Webb, you think, even though you're against the idea of a second referendum, you think it would be a mistake for Truss to just ignore Sturgeon?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Liz Truss's comments were frankly glib. I think it would be unwise for any future Prime Minister, obviously, to ignore the democratically elected First Minister of Scotland. But I think fundamentally the problem here, the problem at the heart of this, is that devolution has been a complete failure. What it has done instead of secure the union is actually arm separatists and is now threatening the constitutional integrity of this country. And I think that the suggestions that what Liz Truss is really representing here is a kind of muscular unionism, and that she's being far more outspoken than any other potential leadership candidate or leader of the Conservative Party has been. I think that there is a real convincing aspect to that muscular unionism when we're seeing so many threats to the union also in relation to Northern Ireland. And so I think there's the suggestions that we need potentially to pass some kind of legislation, perhaps another act of union, in order to secure the integrity and sovereignty of the United Kingdom as a whole. I think that the arguments for that are extremely convincing.
Austin, one thing Nicola Sturgeon doesn't seem to want to speak about is Scotland's record drug deaths. Last week, the figures were announced again. Scotland continues to have by far the highest drug death rate recorded by any country in Europe. What's Sturgeon and the SNP going to do to deal with that epidemic? And wouldn't it be better to spend more money and attention on that rather than this futile push for Indy Referendum 2?
So what I welcome is there was a reduction in drug deaths, but you are right, Dan, it is still far too high. There does have to be more attention and more resources put in place, and I'm sure that the Scottish Government will respond to that in full. But when we were having a wee chat about Nicola Sturgeon's response to pandemics, I really do have to pick with something that a panellist said earlier on about how Nicola Sturgeon enjoyed being on the TV every day.
She did.
We were dealing with,
I could tell just by watching her. She loved the power trip.
We were dealing with a worldwide pandemic where people were dying, and Nicola Sturgeon stood and she faced the nation on a daily basis to update them on what was going on.
She got off on it, I think.
Well, Boris Johnson was number 10. The senior members of the government having parties and sticking the two fingers up to the British public. That's the marked contrast difference between the SNP administration in Edinburgh and the Tory administration in London.
Alan Cochrane, I just raised the point of the Scottish record drug deaths. No answer from Austin, of course.
Dan, this is my hometown. It's Dundee, that is at the top of the hit parade. And it's an absolute disgrace. You're absolutely right. The nationalists have been in power in charge of the health policy, and the health secretary is a Dundee MSP. The current, her undersecretary was also a Dundee MSP, and the death toll is absolutely staggering. So what needs to happen is a note of candour needs to be injected into the relationship between the UK government and the Scottish government. And I think my initial response to Liz Truss was it's a bit daft, but basically what she has done is put the boot in with a bit of candour in relationships between UK and that Tory you quoted, Gavin Barwell. He was part of the problem. Conservative governments have been paying lip service to devolution, shoveling more policies to them all the way along the history of devolution, and they've done nothing with the powers.
Yeah, no, indeed. And look, ignore her on IndyRef 2. That's what I'd say. Hold her to account on issues like Scotland's record drug deaths. Thank you so much. To all of my political masterminds tonight, that was former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan, political writer and pundit James Melville, former Scottish editor for the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, the journalist and author Angela Epstein, and political commentator Emma Webb. So who do you agree with? Should the next PM ignore the attention-seeking Nicola Sturgeon? Sean says Liz Truss is right to call scheming Sturgeon an attention-seeker and right to ignore her. She has too much to say for herself. From James on Twitter, give them a vote. It's up to them. And Nicola is just going to cause trouble until there is one. And from Jenny up here, she's called Elsie McSelfie because anywhere there's a camera, so is she. She's ruined my country, and the majority of us strongly disapprove of her. Scotland's books need a thorough audit, as Lord Fawkes has been calling for. And your verdict is now in. Wow, 90% of you agree that Truss is right, that the next PM should just ignore scheming Sturgeon. 10% of you want her to engage. Fascinating. Coming up, she was among the deluge of resignations that saw Boris ousted, stepping down as Education Secretary after just 35 hours. Now she's backing his natural successor, Liz Truss. Former Education Secretary Michelle Donnellan is here to explain why at 9:50. But first, as Osama bin Laden's scumbag successor is finally taken out, will Prince Charles regret allegedly accepting £1 million in charity cash from the 9/11 mastermind's family? Nigel Farage gives his verdict on our future kings, the latest misjudgment and what it means for the monarchy next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages soon, but now it's time for What the Farage with Britain's favourite Nigel. Top al-Qaeda leader and key architect of the 9/11 attacks, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was killed in a US drone strike, Joe Biden announced late last night. The 71-year-old terrorist scumbag was eliminated by 2 Hellfire Ninja missiles as he stood on a balcony of a safe house in downtown Kabul on Saturday, in a mission that was 6 months in the making. The US president described the death of Osama bin Laden's fanatical deputy and successor as a major blow to the terrorist network behind the deaths of thousands of Americans.
You know, Zawahiri was bin Laden's leader. He was with him the whole time. He was his number 2 man, his deputy at the time the terrorists attacked 9/11. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. People around the world no longer need to fear the vicious and determined killer.
Oh, goodness, he barely got through that, did he? But, I mean, it is welcome news, of course. Zawahiri's death comes after the Sunday Times revealed Prince Charles accepted a £1 million payment from the family of the al-Qaeda chief's predecessor. The future king secured the charitable donation from bin Laden's half-brothers Bakr and Shafiq in 2013, despite the protestations of his advisors at the Prince of Wales Charitable Fund. Clarence House denied those claims and said thorough due diligence was undertaken in accepting the donation, which was approved by the charity's trustees. Now, Nigel, I do want to come to this Prince Charles scandal in a moment because you've got a very strong view in it. But first, of course, the killing of al-Zawahiri by the US. How significant is that?
Not at all. It's history. Al-Qaeda was yesterday's organisation. It moved on to ISIS. Yes, this guy was, as the Americans would say, a bad dude who was complicit in the most horrendous events on 9/11. Was he posing a threat today? I very much doubt it. Was it an act of retribution? Yes. Will it be seen by most Americans as some form of justice? I guess that it will. But I'm not sure it's going to give Joe Biden many plus marks when ISIS are still there and the threat of extreme Islamic terrorism hasn't gone away. So fine, OK, an old score's been settled, but it doesn't solve anything, in my view, for the future.
And Nigel, I mean, I've got to mention Biden and that address. I mean, the bloke could barely get through it. This is actually so worrying now, isn't it?
Amazing, isn't it? Whenever Donald Trump did something they thought was wrong, they screamed the 25th Amendment, which for those that don't know, is the clause in the US Constitution that says the US president is no longer fit and capable to hold office and something must be done. No one cries the 25th, not even the Republicans. You know why? Because they want him there for the midterms. In fact, they want him there until 2024 because they know he actually is really good news and particularly anchored to Kamala Harris, who's even more, what an achievement. She's even more unpopular than Sleepy Joe. You know, I can see why the Republicans think this is a good thing. However, for American leadership of the Western world, given the threats and the battles that we're now engaged in, firstly internal, and we can call it woke, but actually it's the Marxist march through our institutions, the attempt to destroy our identity, our history, and to turn our young people against who we are. And secondly, of course, the outside threat from China. For all of those reasons, having almost no leadership whatsoever, and ironic, isn't it? This happened in Kabul, where last August, a year ago, Biden walked away without even conferring with us. This is not good news.
Nigel, I want to move on to Prince Charles because I know you were as astonished by me at this latest revelation. There's been a drip of leaks coming to the Sunday Times about Charles's charitable trust taking £1 million from the bin Laden family, even though there are relatives who were not connected to Osama by the time of the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
It's just a massive misjudgment, is it not?
I thought Stephen Glover in the Mail put it beautifully. How can someone so intelligent be so stupid? Which, of course, we can apply, across much of our public life. Look, Charles has no judgment, and I think maybe the best thing now that he's getting on a bit is why doesn't he just retire and spend some more time talking to his plants? Because clearly he is going to be a threat. And when I say a threat, I don't just mean to the monarchy, I mean to the Commonwealth. I mean to the English-speaking world. I mean to this remarkable organisation currently having their games up in Birmingham, which will be, I think, if it's used properly, our main defence against the two twin threats that I talked about just a moment ago. And clearly, Charles, and I'm sorry to say this, because, you know, I've met him a few times. He's a nice man. I mean, people that talk to plants are often quite nice, you know. But he's utterly useless. He lacks judgment. He clearly has political opinions that are not in line, not only, Dan, with what you and I think, but actually with where the centre of the country is. I mean, it was very funny. I walked through the Mall on that Thursday of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I mean, that was the best focus group Nigel Farage could ever do, because I spoke to thousands of people as it took me hours to get to the front. I mean, if you ask them, did they agree with Prince Charles that the Rwanda policy was appalling? I doubt you'd have got more than 2%. He's out of touch with the people he potentially wants to lead. He is a threat to the monarchy. He is a threat to the Commonwealth. He is a threat to the integrity of the English-speaking world. And I just wish he could change. But hey, old dogs, new tricks, I doubt it.
At the very least, Nigel, just finally, don't you think it's essential that everything is released now? All of the dealings have to become public. We have to have full transparency with this charity, because, Nigel, you know, if these sorts of revelations continue once he's on the throne, there could be a serious constitutional crisis. We need to know now while the Queen is still alive and kicking.
As I know myself, having been a victim of the Times newspapers, the Sunday Times newspapers, they tend to build a locker full of stories and release them drip by drip by drip. And the more that comes out, the more damaging it becomes. If there's more out there, and because of the charity guidelines, of course, they don't have to declare where the money came from. And I also, Dan, don't know what the Sunday Times' agenda is. It could just be a journalist looking for big stories. I find it hard to believe that they've become Republican overnight. But you're absolutely right. Get all the bad news out of the way as quickly as possible. Drip, drip, drip is a disaster. Hey, didn't Boris Johnson find that? Actually, with Boris, it was little bit by little bit. Salami slice by salami slice.
Death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the danger is, you know, Boris will go on and make millions in America. He'll be fine. You know, the Conservative Party was actually in trouble anyway. But with Charles, this is about more than him, his reputation, his integrity. This is about the future of something very big, very significant, and that heads up a Commonwealth with 2.3 billion people in it. Add the Americans onto that, you've got almost half the planet. And, you know, this really matters.
No, indeed. Couldn't agree more. Nigel Farage, and of course, Farage back 7 o'clock tomorrow night here on GBNews. Thank you, Nigel. A Clarence House spokeswoman responded, because we do get both sides of the story here on GBNews. The Prince of Wales Charitable Fund has assured us that thorough due diligence was undertaken in accepting this donation. The decision to accept was taken by the charity's trustees alone, and any attempt to characterise it otherwise is false. Coming up, as the return of Premier League football beckons, club captains have revolted against players taking the knee. So are they right to show sport's most divisive gesture, the red card? We'll debate that in the media buzz. But first, she's back in trust for PM. But after initially signing with Penny Mordaunt, how unwavering is her support? Michelle Donnellan is here next on the Leadership Latest, her whirlwind 35 hours as Education Secretary, and whether she still believes ousting Boris was the right move for her party. Back soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
We're going to give you the first look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight as we reveal the front pages hot off the press shortly. But first, the latest in the battle to be PM. And just last month, Michelle Donnellan was catapulted into the thick of a political storm when she was appointed Nadeem Zahawi's replacement as Education Secretary after Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid's bombshell resignations upended Boris Johnson's cabinet. Having won praise for her no-nonsense approach to the woke infiltration of campuses during her time as Universities Minister, Michelle seemed a natural choice. But less than 48 hours after her appointment, she joined the deluge of resignations to help oust the very Prime Minister who had just promoted her. After initially backing Penny Mordaunt in the leadership race, Donnellan waited to hear the final candidates' pitches on education and the economy before eventually backing Liz Truss. And it is great to have Michelle with me now. So, Michelle, look, I want to talk about Truss and why you're backing her in just a moment. But first, can we talk about Boris? And you will have seen the latest polls, which show the Conservative Party in a very healthy position compared to Labour. Of course, there's this grassroots movement with about 14,000 of your members saying that there should be a Boris ballot. Do you think you made a mistake resigning and forcing Boris out, or at least in part contributing to it?
Well, look, the reason why I resigned was at the time it was completely untenable, and I felt it was irresponsible for us to carry on without enough people to be ministers in key roles. You know, what would have happened if something like a Grenfell had happened or a 9/11? And at that point, it needed some more people, especially in the cabinet, to come forward and enact change. I wasn't in that first wave that were reacting to incidences that had happened because, you know, I backed Boris through thick and thin, but there does come a limit when we have to put our country first and do what we believe is the right thing to do. But now I do believe the time is to look forward. You know, Boris Johnson did some incredible things. I was a whip in the time when we were trying to get Brexit done under Theresa May, and it was very difficult. It was like banging your head against a brick wall. Boris came in, was a breath of fresh air. He got Brexit done. Look at how he handled the country through the pandemic with the vaccine rollout. And there are, you know, his handling of the war in the Ukraine more recently. There are so many things we should attribute to him personally. But now is the time to look forward. And we have two candidates on that ballot.
So you initially backed Mordaunt. How difficult was it for you after she was knocked out of the race to choose between Sunak and Truss?
Well, I've worked with both of them. I've been in cabinet for nearly a year. And I believe that Liz Truss is the only one that will be able to break down those barriers, challenge that economic orthodoxy that has crept in, and will be that true voice of conservatism. I'm a low-tax conservative. I believe that enabling people to spend their own money is the best way forward, especially in a cost of living crisis. I want to ensure that we're growing the economy, that we're providing the skills to fill the jobs, that we are helping and supporting people through what will be a very difficult year. And I don't think taxing people through that is the right answer, nor do I think the same old policies are the right answer. We need somebody that's going to tackle the unions head on, that's going to help our farmers, particularly important in my constituency, and really address these challenges with fresh ideas and fresh policies. And that's certainly what Liz has to bring to the table.
Did Sunak chase your endorsement, and did you let him know that you were going to be backing Truss?
Yeah, I spoke to both of them. I think that's the right approach to take, having worked with both of them quite closely. But for me, it was obvious that I had to back Liz. She is somebody that has a reputation, I would argue, across the House for delivery. She's not somebody that just talks a good game. She actually comes up with the goods, which is what we're going to need to do in the next 2 years before the next general election. We've got a great deal of that manifesto yet to complete. And as I said, really challenging times ahead. So I want to be confident that the next Prime Minister is going to deliver, and deliver for my constituents as well as the country.
Now, obviously, look, finally, you had your dream job, Michelle, for only 35 hours, which must have been incredibly frustrating. Would you hope in a Truss administration that you might get the nod to be education secretary?
That's certainly not in my gift, or I wouldn't get a say in that. Obviously, I did have my dream job. That is my dream job. I am very passionate about education, and that was part of the decision making when I looked at who is in the final two. I know that Liz, she's already spoken about becoming the education Prime Minister. She is passionate about education. She understands the importance of education and skills in terms of our long-term economic health of our country, as well as providing those opportunities to people to create that aspiration nation that, as Conservatives, we want to see happen. But I'm confident that she's the person that can actually deliver that and change that from being a slogan into being reality. So I'm 100% behind Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister.
Very good endorsement. Very well put. That's the former Education Secretary, now Liz Truss supporter MP, Michelle Donald. We'll speak soon. Michelle, thank you.
Thank you.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it was only a matter of time before the establishment and MSM turned on Liz Truss, and today her campaign was pressured into its first major U-turn over reforms to the Whitehall machine. But were there merits to her targeted cutting of civil servant wages designed to help save billions in Westminster waste? I'm going to put that to my superstar panel later this hour. Tonight, I'm joined by former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, esteemed political journalist John Sargent, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. The countdown to the new Premier League season is on, and exasperated club captains reportedly want to kick the game's most divisive gesture into touch. So, should footballers stop taking the knee? That's our big debate next. Other star-crossed lovers who send shockwaves through the world. Father of two, Tony Garnett, was being a good Samaritan when he took in a Ukrainian refugee. Then he sensationally shacked up with her and dumped his partner of 8 years. Well, Tony and Sophia join me live in the studio to reveal all about their astonishing affair. That's at 10:20. After the inspiring success of the Lionesses and a rugby ban for trans athletes, are we witnessing a sea change in attitudes to fairness in sport? Top British marathon star Mary Yamauchi has bravely spoken out in defence of women's sport, and she's uncancelled on that at 10:40. Plus, he might be half the world away, but Noel Gallagher's #1 hit follows him everywhere. I'll show you more of the Oasis Stars holiday from hell in our media buzz later this hour. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspapers as they drop in, as ever. Brand new Greatest British Union jackass before the show is finished. But first, the news with Holly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. Our main story tonight on GB News, the hospital treating Archie Battersby says they'll begin to withdraw his life support tomorrow morning. The 12-year-old boy has been in a coma since April after an accident at home, and he's been declared brain-stem dead by doctors. 3 judges refused to postpone the withdrawal of his treatment and also refused permission to appeal against their ruling. Archie's mother, Holly Dance, described the hospital's actions as cruel and said she's heartbroken.
Archie's my child. It shouldn't be down to other people to decide where he takes his last breath and if he lives or dies. It's wrong. He's on free medications. He's absorbing feed. He's gained weight. That's on record. He's gained weight. You know, it's definitely not what they're putting over to the court, but the court aren't prepared to listen or allow us to have independent specialists in. There's not really much more I can do.
Archie Battersby's mum. Now, in other news today, a man who was arrested for carrying a crossbow in the grounds of Windsor Castle has been charged under the Treason Act. Police say Jaswant Singh Chail from Southampton is accused of intending to injure or alarm the Queen. The 20-year-old was intercepted on Christmas Day last year. He'll appear in court later this month. BP has reported a profit of nearly £7 billion for the second quarter. That's its biggest profit in 14 years. That comes at the same time as UK householders are hit by rising oil and gas prices, with inflation at its highest in 40 years. A consultancy firm has warned energy bills could reach more than £3,600 for each household this winter. British Airways has suspended the sale of short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week, affecting domestic and European flights. BA says the move is in response to Heathrow's request to limit new bookings. Last month, the airport announced a daily limit of 100,000 passengers through the airport until mid-September. Police have issued an arrest warrant for the older brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. Ismail Abedi, who fled the UK last summer, failed to attend the public inquiry into the 2017 attack at Manchester Magistrates Court today. Last month, he also failed to comply with the inquiry, and he faces a jail term of up to 51 weeks if he's captured or if he hands himself in. Happier news to end with. There was a royal treat at the Commonwealth Games today. Princess Charlotte joined her parents in Birmingham. 7-year-old Charlotte accompanied the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to learn about preparing the next generation of sportsmen and women for their future events. England are currently second in the medals table on day 5, 27 gold and 27 silver. More to come, no doubt. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, and it's GB News. And now it's Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in. Let's get straight to them. So much for the legacy, says the Eye, following the triumph of the Lionesses at the Euros this weekend. The publication reports that the Department of Education has refused to give girls equal opportunity to play football in school PE lessons. Heartbreak for Archie's family is the Metro's top story as judges refused a final reprieve for the 12-year-old schoolboy who is due to have his life support stopped, as we just heard from Polly there in the news. Brazen profiteers, say the Mirror. The paper leads with the news today that BP has raked in over £6.9 billion in profit in 3 months, all the while households continue to struggle with crippling energy bills. My superstar panel back with me now, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the star political journalist John Sargent, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, for over 2 years, Premier League players have been taking the knee before matches. But the gesture could finally be given the boot when the new season kicks off this weekend. The Mail on Sunday has revealed that club captains met with league officials to discuss the issue, with players believing it has lost its impact and should only be performed at select fixtures in the future. Now, I've long considered taking the knee to be little more than divisive virtue signalling, backing the anti-capitalist organisation Black Lives Matter, which, let's just remember, wants to defund the police, destroy the family unit and tear down society. So I think this is the right move, especially given the increasing booing from fans at the gesture. And Dawn Neeson, you attend, all your matches at your beloved West Ham.
I do indeed. And
It's right for it to go, isn't it?
I totally agree. And the season, ironically, kicks off on Friday when you have got Crystal players playing Arsenal, and Wilfried Zaha is one of the few players that's always refused to take, the Palace player, always refused to take the knee. Now, he can do it because he's black. Now, I know a lot of sort of like footballers, sort of mixed-race footballers and white players who have longed to stop doing this. They don't want politics involved in football. They're not racist, doesn't mean you're not
They would
racist.
be pilloried, they'd be on the front page of every
This is the thing.
newspaper.
I mean, Zaha can do it and it's fine and doesn't get any stick. And, there are clubs that are already doing it. I mean, Bournemouth stopped taking the knee.
Good on them.
Bristol City and Swansea City have also said they're
Good on
not
them.
doing it. But, the thing is with this, Dan, the timing is very suspicious, I think, because there's an awful lot of these top-flight players who are playing in our league who are heading off to Qatar for the World Cup this autumn. And why take the knee when you can take the money? I'm sorry,
Well,
that's
indeed.
what it's about.
I mean, John, I think about this all the time. I really do, because seriously, I support the England team. Of course I do. I think they're great. But if they have the cheek to take the knee at the World Cup in Qatar, a country... I mean, let's not even go into it. We know what they do to women, we know what they do to foreign workers, and we know what they do to gay people. We know that. If they have the cheek to take the knee there, I just will lose the plot, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is just to make sure that the black players particularly don't feel this is some kind of retreat. And I think, it's all to do with if the captains decide, OK, but I'd like to be certain that those players, particularly the ones who've been booed and people have, monkey noises and throwing bananas and all that sort of thing, that is grotesque. That really is grotesque.
It is. But
whereas just bending the knee and people saying, look, this is virtue signalling and so on, all right, but at least there's a virtue that they're talking about. Whereas this horrible racism is something which, given that I don't know anything about this, I don't go to football matches, I watch it on the box, but to me, to try and make sure that if you're a black player, you feel when you're on the pitch, you have every right to be there and that people aren't against you. That seems to be so much more important
John,
than whether or not you continue with something that's lost its force, lost its gravitas and so on.
Can I just pick you up on one thing? Because you put into the same category folk who boo taking the knee with despicable racists who make monkey noises at players. Now, that, by the way, is such a tiny minority. We're talking about a minuscule number, but of course it is despicable and that racism needs to be stamped out. Folk who boo taking the knee, I'm sorry, I've said right from the start, I do not believe for a single political gesture introduced on these shores from the US.
I wish that was always the case, though, Dan, but people aren't as you make out. When you've got when something's polarised, the assumption that the people know what they're doing and they're behaving in a sort of decent fashion. No, some of the people who are booing, taking the knee, are racist.
Like what we saw in Hungary.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Hungary.
Yeah.
Not in the UK. Now, you love taking the knee, don't you? You want it to continue forever. You'd like us to take the knee before this show, probably.
Shall we all take the knee now? No, if I was a footballer,
Please don't.
So if I was the manager of a football team, I would get them to take the knee and not get up again until this racism that John just so very accurately described was stopped. And I imagine, in fact, I don't imagine, I know that they'd be on their knees for a very, very long time.
Can we just stop this demonising of football fans?
Yeah, as if this racism is rampant.
No,
it's not. It's
all racist.
tiny.
How many football games do you go to, Amy?
Oh, no, I don't know anything about football.
Well, there you go. I go every week, week in, week out, and it's not like that. It was like that. Things have improved enormously. And I think the whole taking the knee thing has been more divisive. It's caused more hatred. It's probably caused more booing than you would have got in any case. So I think it's like, and so many of the players are just not interested. They just don't want to do it anymore.
I think I've got a better solution, though. I think if you're a player and you hear anything that John described, you just stop playing. And you say, I'm not going to play anymore while this is going on.
Well, how do you know who they're booing, why they're booing? They could be booing someone who's just committed a foul.
If you hear anything that he's just described, they're within their rights to just stop playing.
We've got a player called a boo, right? Every time you shout his name out, it sounds like you're booing.
not necessarily a boo, because we're talking about more than that, aren't we? And I think Gareth Southgate described it really well when he said the reason players are taking the knee is just to support each other. So there's members of the team.
They're taking the knee because they feel like they have to.
You never forget those comments that were sent to Rashford, Saka, Sancho after that.
No one's defending that
that's
at all.
why
Amy, there were about 6 of them from the UK. There was actual analysis done on those comments, and I think there was one person who ended up in court because he sent it from the UK. The vast majority of the rest of them were actually sent from overseas IP addresses, with a serious suspicion that this was probably Russia and bad foreign agents trying to make us look like a country that we're not. So why do you embrace the tiny majority? The tiny minority. Why do you embrace the tiny minority to paint a picture, as Dawn says, English football stadiums full of racists? They are not.
Right, that epistle says to me, thou dost protest too much, and there is a bit of a problem here. And unfortunately, the opposition to taking the knee is a very vocal, aka you, minority. And in fact, the majority of people support it and want it to continue.
No, they don't.
Just as an anti-racist statement. Who cares? It's a tiny little
You've got
gesture.
to ask most football fans if they support their team taking the knee, and I can guarantee most of them will say no.
And by the way, it is not a tiny little anti-racist gesture. It is a gesture completely connected with the Black Lives Matter organisation, which is one of the most corrupt and divisive organisations of modern times, that wants to defund the police, that wants to destroy the family.
They just see it as an anti-racist statement, and it precedes the Black Lives Matter movement. You've just pinned it to that so you can denounce it.
Well, it doesn't precede the Black Lives Matter.
Well, it does.
No, I mean, you make a powerful point about the Black Lives Matter.
And it is directly...
No, I'm in complete agreement with you on that.
Taking the knee.
But I don't think most people associate it with Black Lives Matter as much as they do as an anti-racist.
Well, they do in this country, because no one was taking the knee in this country before the death of George Floyd
in the
US.
The majority of people think it just shows a commitment to tackling the racial inequality in football, and it's a good, nice thing. Just leave it be, because it's nice and sweet.
No, because taking the knee actually began in America when... the players were doing it during the national anthem, I believe, which I think is a really disgraceful
against police brutality in the US.
OK, and that's in their country, and if that's what they want to do, fine. But what were they protesting against here?
The majority of people think that it's important. 61% of people still think it's important, and it encourages younger football fans to look and encourage anti-racism, which is surely a good thing.
OK, remember just a few weeks ago when all the folk out there without an agenda were celebrating the Platinum Jubilee. As part of the festivities, a gorgeous book, let's have a look at it, there it is, about the reign of Queen Elizabeth II was released to school children all across the UK. But it's now been revealed that one of its harshest critics is none other than Nicola Sturgeon's SNP government, which demanded a whopping 52 revisions before it was sent to Scottish kids. Among the edits individual SNP ministers requested pre-publication, well, you're not going to believe this, all mentions of Brexit, England's 1966 World Cup victory, and even the very title of Queen Elizabeth II. A family sightseeing tour of London was deemed too Anglo-centric. The reasons for building Hadrian's Wall were disputed. An issue was even taken with the death of the Queen Mother in 2002 being described as a tragedy, which they claimed sounded too tabloidy. I mean, every death is a tragedy, Nicola, let alone that of a figure that stood shoulder to shoulder with our greatest generation as German bombs rained down on Buckingham Palace. How on earth are children all over the United Kingdom meant to learn about the greatest living monarch's reign when Sturgeon and her army of minions are intent on editing history before our very eyes? She is Scotland's Queen too, Nicola, remember that. SNP ministers even went so far as to entirely remove Scottish schools from the book's distribution list. Goodness me. Now, from one hater of British tradition to another, Lydia Thorpe, a radical Green Aboriginal senator in Australia, has gone viral for her refusal to follow protocols while being sworn in yesterday, even raising a salute which has become synonymous with political causes such as socialism and the Black Power movement, and describing the Queen as the colonising Her Majesty. Look at this.
I, Sovereign Lydia Thorpe, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Senator Thorpe.
Senator Thorpe, you are required to recite the oath as printed on the card, so please recite the oath. Order.
I, Lydia Thorpe, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors according to law.
I might just remind that sneering Senator Thorpe that Australia actually voted democratically to keep the monarchy and the Queen as its head of state. Amy Nicole, John Sargent, Jordan Easton, do stand by because coming up, the Trust campaign was today forced into its first major U-turn, but were there merits to her targeted cutting of civil servant wages designed to help save billions in Westminster waste? Well, my Superstar panel will return to debate that. We'll have more front pages for you too, by the way, at 10:30. But coming up next, father of two, Tony Garnett, made headlines around the world when he sensationally dumped his long-term partner for a Ukrainian refugee they'd opened their home to. The star-crossed love is at the centre of this bitter love triangle. Join me in the studio to reveal the fallout of their international affair going viral. That's next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Time now to delve into a real-life love triangle that even Hollywood executives would have struggled to dream up. It was a scandal that hit front pages all over the world. Father of two, Tony Garnett, left his partner of 8 years, Lorna, after he fell in love with the Ukrainian refugee Sofia Karkadim. The 22-year-old fled Lviv, as the war with Russia raged. And after 2 months of moving from pillar to post, she was eventually sponsored by Tony and welcomed into his Bradford family home. But just 10 days into the arrangement, Sofia was repacking her bags after Lorna accused her of trying to steal her man. Then, in an astonishing twist, Smith and Tony followed Sofia out the door. Now, Sofia has defended their affair and declared that she's no homewrecker, blaming Lorna's suspicion and paranoia for forcing her and Tony together. However, as with all messy breakups, there is two sides to the story. Of course, Tony's jilted ex-lover hit back at the pair, saying she set her sights on Anthony from the start. She decided she wanted him and they took him. She didn't care about the devastation that was left behind. I just don't understand how he could throw all that away for a woman he's known for a fortnight. The life I knew is shattered. But even now, the pair continue to face condemnation as they try to start their new lives together. And to reveal the impact the tantalising headlines have had on their lives, Tony and Sophia join me now. So, Tony, I was completely blown away by this story when it first hit the headlines. Obviously, you've been painted as the bad guy because you're in a relationship with a woman and you've been with her for 8 years. You both agree to accept a Ukrainian refugee into your home and you run off with her in a matter of days. But I know there's two sides to the story, Tony, so what's yours?
Well, first of all, I like to say every story needs a villain, regardless of what the story is. Now, what the media's put out there to obviously the true story, what we know to have happened in family and friends, we paint it as a very different picture. Now, first of all, I didn't arrange to meet Sophia to have a relationship with her. I didn't meet her to run off with her. What has happened after. Obviously, due to me, I wanted to take care of Sophia, not even if it was Sophia.
So can I just clarify? Yeah. When you agreed to have a Ukrainian refugee in your home, you obviously agreed it with Lorna.
Of course.
Did you know that it was going to be Sophia that you were taking in, a very glamorous Ukrainian woman?
No, we was willing to help anybody. Well, I say we, I mean myself, male, female, whether they're 18 years old up to an elderly person. We didn't care. We just knew we had the facilities to help someone. So in my eyes, I wanted to help someone, regardless of what it just happened to be Sophia.
And Sophia, you obviously enter into the household. Was it love at first sight with Tony?
Not from first second, of course, because I didn't have an aim to steal someone or find love. I just wanted to build a new life and find a job, find a new house in near future, because I understand that live together, it's not so good for their family and for myself. But what happened? That happened.
Absolutely. And look, Tony, I always say, follow your heart. You've got to go for love when you can find it. However, there are folk who say, look, Sophia was vulnerable, Tony. I mean, look at what she's had to go through in Ukraine. She's had to flee her country. She's in a vulnerable state.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have gone on, but they're not also realising. When they put out, she came to my home for 10 days before I left. Well, yes, I did leave after 10 days. However, how long have I been speaking to her beforehand, before this happened? How long have I helped to go from Ukraine into Germany? What have I known for it to happen whilst you're in Germany? I paid for a plane ticket to get over it. They don't understand the full story, the full concept. Now, I wanted to help, anybody. What has happened has happened. People are obviously going to spin it and obviously going to say, oh, he's took advantage of this young girl, he's done this, oh, what a bad guy, he's left his partner, he's done this, he's done that. They don't understand the full story. Now, realistically, man to man, if you was with someone that length of period, would you leave and look at another woman after 10 days if there wasn't underlying issues? No, you wouldn't.
So you're saying the relationship was effectively over?
Yeah, there was numerous issues ongoing. It was more like it was comfort for the pair of us. I was there, I could see my children, I was the breadwinner, I'd be paying, bills, the rent and things like that. But in terms of relationship, we didn't do things that normal couples do. We didn't go out for drinks, meals, things that you should be doing with someone you're in a relationship with.
Sophia, Lorna says that you just set your sights on Tony from the start.
To be honest, on the second day when I had an operation for my eye because I have an infection, I get it in Germany because of conditions of life. And
you've lost some of your sight.
Yes. And after this operation, Anthony called back to Lorna because it was a lot of missed calls, and on a loudspeaker she was talking about me already very bad words, and she was very jealous. But it was just the second day when I come, and it was very hard day for myself. So
but maybe, I mean, she was right though, wasn't she? I mean,
on the second day.
Well, maybe she could sense the attraction that you couldn't. I mean, Tony, look, is this the real deal for you now? Because obviously, what's going to happen with Sophia? We don't know how long the war in Ukraine is going to go on. Do you want to marry her? Are you prepared for her to live with you permanently? Is this true love?
Well, the way I see it now, we are together, we are in love. She's living with me now, we're living as a normal couple, like any man and wife. Now, marriage, for me, it's something that you think of in the future. If you're in a relationship with someone, you're not going to get into a relationship, into bed with someone, not thinking of the ultimate goal. If you're thinking like that, you know, you're probably a teenager, a few girlfriends on the side, we've all done it. But, you know, when you become our age and you've got kids, you don't want to be going from pillar to post with different females. You want to be settling down with someone that you can, you know, talk to, you can have fun to, you're excited to see. You know, that's the ultimate goal.
Sophia, I guess one of the things I was thinking when I was looking into this story was, gosh, are you worried that what's happened with you might actually put off other wives taking in Ukrainian refugees? Because if they think, oh my goodness, some glamorous young Ukrainian is going to come in and steal my husband, they might not think it's worth the risk.
I was worried about this because on the one article, Lona's article, it was mentioned that I don't recommend you to take refuge anymore to your house or think before you're doing this. It's wrong, you know. After you see everything what is going on in my country, you can say something like this? Serious?
Yeah.
It's horrible. I don't think that it should affect somebody because it's stupid. It's really stupid. It happens with me and Tony, and I'm sure that it's 1 per million situation. It cannot be happens every day with everybody.
No.
To find the love, it's very, very complicated.
And Sophia, just finally, what's the situation like back in Lviv now, and how are you coping with the time away?
No, situation in Lviv is okay, but in general in Ukraine is not okay, you know. Every day, even Sky News posting something horrible about Putin's plans for a future, for new bombs, new problems, and I'm scary about my relatives, about my friends, about my country. Yes, I'm safe, but it still is going on there, you know.
No, indeed. Well, look, at least you have Tony by your side now, and I very much appreciate you coming in and putting your side of the story, because I know you've both had to take a lot of flack about this, a lot of flack, and sometimes I guess you just have to follow your heart. That was Tony Garnett and Sophia Karkadim. Of course, we do have both sides of the story here on GB News. Tony's ex-partner, Lorna, hasn't been here to defend herself, but she did recently tell The Sun. Tony seems to love the attention, but I can't bear it. I feel humiliated by it all. No one really knows the truth. After 8 years together, I thought I knew him, but I didn't. All I want now is peace to rebuild my life with our 2 girls. And coming up, after the inspiring success of the Lionesses and a rugby ban for trans athletes, are we witnessing a sea change in attitudes to fairness in sport? Top British marathon star Mara Yamauchi has been a brave defender of women's sports. She's uncancelled at 10:40. But first, Truss's campaign was forced into its first major U-turn by the MSM today after trying to save billions in Whitehall waste. But was there actually any merit to this proposed civil service pay cut plan? We're going to debate that next, plus more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages too, straight after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight on our Media Buzz. Lots more front pages have just been delivered. The Guardian reports on soaring profits being enjoyed by energy companies while Brits prepare for a massive hike in their household bills. This is after the world's 5 biggest oil companies made nearly $50 billion. The Times lead on a breaking story this evening that over 60% of Tory members prefer Truss to be our next Prime Minister. We'll be bringing you more on that very shortly. Princess Charlotte also makes a spirited appearance on the front page. What a lovely and cute picture that is. She's at the Commonwealth Games swimming. I'm very jealous about that. And oh my goodness, Wagatha Christie, there it is on the front page. Rebecca Vardy, she ain't taking this lying down. Oh no, she's not. I rang Colleen and said, what the F is this? Do you know, I spent far too long on, when was it? Friday, because I was writing a column for the Mail Online. So I read every word of the Wagatha Christie court verdict, the judge's verdict. I was mentioned a couple of times. I think she's banged to rights, I'm afraid. I think she is banged to rights, but you've got to respect her front, I guess. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the political journalist, John Sargent, and the author and broadcaster, Amy Nicol. Now, Margaret Thatcher is Liz Truss's idol, but unfortunately she couldn't emulate her today after a mainstream media pile-on forced her to back down on a controversial new policy.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Now, Truss had pledged to wage war on Whitehall waste if she follows Maggie into number 10. She outlined a plan to replace national pay boards with regional ones that would set salaries for civil servants based on where they live. Under the scheme, which Truss said would save £8.8 billion if rolled out across the public sector, government employees in less affluent parts of the country would be paid less than their counterparts in prosperous areas such as London and the South East, reflecting the cost of living. Backers of rival Fishy Rishi, who coined the cruel slogan "less under Liz," and the MSM quickly set upon Truss, forcing her to release a statement retracting the plan and acknowledging that public sector workers are the bedrock of society. And I think when you take a look at this, you'll see that Truss very quickly got her head around what was going on.
I'm afraid that my policy on this has been misrepresented. I never had any intention of changing the terms and conditions of teachers and nurses. But what I want to be clear about is I will not be going ahead with the regional pay boards. That is no longer my policy. I'm being absolutely honest. I'm concerned that people were worried, unnecessarily worried about my policies, and therefore I'm being clear that the regional pay boards will not go ahead.
But there's loads going on tonight in this Tory leadership contest, and this could be slightly bad news for Truss. It's looking like the party ballots, which people actually use to vote, are not going to be sent out yet because of fears that they could be hacked, which is a real worry. Although the good news is the newly released YouGov poll for the Times shows Truss has extended her lead among party members, storming 34 points ahead. Now, the survey has been conducted over the past 5 days because it doesn't take into account today's U-turn, but it shows 60% support for Truss versus 26% for Sunak, with the remainder undecided. So, John Sargent, was it wrong for Truss and her team to so quickly give in to the first sign of pushback about a flagship policy?
Well, I suppose, it's this old thing about get your denials in quickly, speed kills,
Yeah.
So from that point of view, technically it was right, but what a disaster. This is only 12 hours before this to have supported it, and for them to say that the policy was misrepresented, and then to say that she wasn't thinking about nurses and doctors and things, whereas the whole
Do you think
point,
she was? Do you think the policy does?
Otherwise, how does it add up to nearly 9 billion? And who are the people then who are going to just sort of horrible civil servants, as it were, the most unpopular ones,
Very
pick them
Boris,
out and so name the ones who are boring and horrible. Well, they're the ones who are... And then she said this thing about, I wasn't going to change their conditions of service. No, because under the plan, as I understood it, the people who are at present employed would continue in the same way.
This was about
and the differences would then come into effect. But again, how do you get to nearly 9 billion if you don't act pretty firmly? But no, the whole policy was completely misguided. When I saw it, I thought, well, where's levelling up in this?
It's levelling down.
It was levelling down.
Because, Amy, you think that actually if you live outside London and you're employed by the government, you should be paid the same as someone who's in London, regardless of cost of living, because that's
Of course I do, because we're trying to level up, and that requires putting money into these areas to be able to achieve that. This is absolutely outrageous. Do you know, at the moment, if you work in the civil service, I've got a friend that works in the civil service, and she would make the same, she's very senior, she would make the same money as a junior in the private equivalent, right? They're already underpaid.
Yes, and
the salaries are at a 40-year low.
They have they have a lot of job security. That's the first thing. And during the COVID pandemic, when lots of folk were furloughed, they got their full salary. But do you not understand why? I actually understand what you're saying. I get that it looks bad, but do you understand why this sort of policy is in place? Because what you risk is no one will want to be a civil servant in London, where rent prices and transport prices are considerably higher.
In most of these jobs, there is already a London living wage in place, so they are slightly different. This wasn't about that. This wasn't about a London living wage. This was about bringing down, actually reducing in these roles that are already suffering massive retention problems. These aren't attractive jobs anymore. We have a complete need to fill these roles, and she's making them. I think this is hilarious. I love that this has happened because it's absolutely stuck the spanner in your Liz Truss. Because this is indefensible. That's why they had to wheel out Jacob Rees-Mogg to defend the indefensible.
I'm sorry, Don. I think it's indefensible when it comes to teachers and nurses. I don't think it's indefensible when it comes to pen pushers at the BBC or pen pushers at, the Department of Education, who refuse to come into the office one day a week. I don't. I mean, the civil service in this country is out of control.
Look, I agree, and I think that I agree with John on this one. I think the problem is that Liz hadn't thought it through before she announced it, and it makes her look very weak by announcing a U-turn straight away. The policy, in theory, could be made to work, but the way she's gone about it is wrong, because rather than tackling, as you say, the faceless blob, I mean, I had a quick look through the civil service list of jobs available at the moment. You could be head of equality, diversity and inclusion. Yes, that one again. And that's £76,000.
And she's going to scrap all of those jobs.
These are the ones.
And that was a great part of the policy.
That's the bit she needed to concentrate on. But by rolling it out in the way it was, so nurses and firefighters and policemen in the regions would lose money. It was just done the wrong way round.
But John, I guess just putting your political strategy cap on, people were saying this morning, oh my goodness, this is like Theresa May's dementia tax moment, and so that's why her team moved very, very fast to shut the policy down.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that sort of thing. No, I think I have to say, I think it's unlikely to have a dramatic effect on this particular rather strange race between the two of them.
Because it's the
and this is a very odd kind of contest. We know much more about general elections and what happens there and how things change. But even then, the one that I remember is when Margaret Thatcher was asked why she had private dentistry, or why did she get private health, and she just said, "Well, I've got to know when I'm going to have it. I've got to have it done when I want it done. I've got to be able to go there." And everyone thought, "There's a gaff, it'll all go wrong." Didn't have any effect on the opinion polls at all. They just thought that's her being her.
Yeah.
But Liz Truss being Liz Truss has absolutely shown her true colours. This, paired with the ridiculous remark about Nicola Sturgeon, she forgets that the wider population, the wider electorate are listening to her, and comments like this is just political suicide. It's hilarious. I love to see it.
We'll see, Amy. We'll see. The polls are looking very good, by the way, for the Tory party at the moment. 1 point behind Labour. 1 point behind Labour with all of this chaos going on. We'll see, Amy. Now, when you're a rock and roll star, you're going to have plenty of awkward fan encounters and you've just got to roll with it. That's why I salute Noel Gallagher for the extreme restraint he showed when a restaurant serenaded him. This was so funny with the Oasis hit Wonderwall halfway around the world. Have a look. He's in Ibiza, by the way. Dawn Neeson recognises the restaurant, Dawn. But I just thought that was so incredible because if you know Noel Gallagher, that is not what he wants. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want the attention at all. And you could just see him thinking, I want the beach to swallow me up.
Whereas us four would have absolutely loved it.
You would have adored it. Amy Nicole, John Sargent, Dawn Neeson, thank you so much. Do stand by, though, because coming up, football came home to England, but will tonight's title of Honorary Union Jackass be heading to Germany? But first, after trans athletes are banned from rugby union and rugby league, are women on the verge of winning the fight for fairness in sport? Top British marathon star Mara Yamauchi has bravely spoken out in defence of women's sport, and she's here next. First, though, quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, he exposed the scandal that helped bring down the PM, but now Chris Pincher accuser and former Olympic rower Alex Story wants Boris to stay in number 10. He'll join me live. Plus, it's a blockbuster night of opinion courtesy of top US journalist Megyn Kelly, columnist extraordinaire Rod Little and best-selling writer Lionel Shriver. And as ever, I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top names speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, women's sport has been in the headlines this week for all the right reasons after the Lionesses brought home England's first major football trophy since 1966 at the Euros. And there are positive signs that the fight for fair competition has been won. In a rare triumph for common sense, trans women will soon be banned from playing in female rugby union and rugby league. The Rugby Football Union Council last weekend voted to enact the new policy for the next season, while the Rugby Football League Board ruled players in all contact rugby leagues from the under-12s category and above will only be able to play as the gender originally recorded on their birth certificate. That's from August. Now, my next guest is a Commonwealth Games medalist and one of the few athletes speaking up for women. Britain's second fastest marathon runner and author of the new book, Marathon Wisdom and Elite Athletes, Insights on Running and Life. And I'm delighted that Mara Yamauchi joins me now in the studio. And it has been amazing, hasn't it, since we first spoke, Mara, to see changes starting to happen. I know it's probably too early, you'd say it's too early to declare victory, but at least the protection of women's sport now is very much on the agenda.
Yes, I agree. You just mentioned rugby union and rugby league. I welcome those decisions. We had the decision from FINA, the world governing body for swimming, British triathlon as well. So I think the tide is turning, but it's very much not over. You know, I've seen just today on Twitter the backlash that the two rugby boards have faced. And there's just so much lack of understanding about sport and about the differences in physical advantages that males have over females. So there's still a long way to go, but we're making some progress.
Well, indeed, and the likes of you and Sharon Davies have been so amazing to shine a light on this issue because I know from having covered it closely, one of the terrible things is, Mara, is that you are immediately, because the same things happened to me, you're immediately branded transphobic or this term TERF.
Yeah.
And look, I don't care. They can say whatever they want about me. And I know Sharon Davies is very brave on this too, and so are you. But the issue is it actually puts a lot of people off from speaking out because they're so worried about being termed that.
Yeah, the term transphobic really has lost all meaning. It's hurled at anybody who challenges the dogma of gender identity ideology. And if you challenge them what they actually mean, you know, they can't come up with anything. So, you know, people can call me a transphobe all they want. I will continue to defend women's sport for people born female only, because without that, we no longer have women's sport. What we would have is mixed sport and men's sport. We all know that females will never be able to compete in the male category because of the massive differences. So, yeah, people like myself and Sharon, we will continue to speak up. And I would encourage others to speak as well, because, you know, when I've seen polls on this issue, the vast majority of the general public, I've seen 3 Twitter polls, 97% agreed that males should not be in women's sport.
Do you know one thing I found fascinating? Because obviously the moment with the Lionesses was brilliant. Of course it was. And it was just a beautiful moment for the country. But I have to admit, I found it very ironic when you had all of these folk who refused to define what a woman was, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, weren't even prepared to say, you know, whether a woman could have a penis or not. All of a sudden, they were championing this team as great models for young girls and for their daughters. But actually, all it would take is one of those 22 players on the pitch to be born a biological male, and the whole game might as well have been over. And that's how finely balanced this debate is.
Yeah, I mean, I completely share your concern about how the politicians reacted. I mean, particularly people like Nicola Sturgeon, who's pushing self-ID in Scotland. There she is, you know, praising the women when she can't even define what a woman is. You know, same for Keir Starmer. And, yeah, another question I think people need to ask themselves is, supposing they watched that match and there was a male on the pitch, how would they feel about that? If, for example, the German goalkeeper had been male, how would they feel about that, regardless of the result? You know, even if England still won, would they feel that was okay? You know, one of the most prominent trans women footballers in the UK is Blair Hamilton, who plays in goal, and men are, on average, taller than females, and height matters massively in goal. Men, on average, have longer arms, longer legs than females. So, you know, I encourage your viewers to just ask themselves, how would I feel if Germany had fielded a trans woman, somebody born male, in a women's European Cup championship final?
Well, we would have thought it was unfair. And look, since this issue has... I mean, I've always been a big champion of women's sport, and particularly netball is the sport that I support, and it's exactly the same as football, where you could have one of the 7 team members and the whole game would be destroyed. So again, that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this personally. But I've looked into the science a lot over these past few months. And even the woke scientists, right, who want to be able to say, oh, no, it's okay, even they have now had to admit that years of hormone treatment, even 5 years of hormone treatment, doesn't go anywhere near as far as it needs to overturn male puberty and the changes of male puberty. And so it's sad. Of course this is sad. And, you know, I feel sorry for Leah Thomas. You know, it was horrible watching the interview with her, but it's not fair.
Yeah, you know, we've got into this... The problem is we've got into the debate about testosterone levels in adult males. Can this undo male advantage? And this is like trying to unboil an egg. It does not remove advantage. Males acquire advantage through puberty, which takes several years, driven by testosterone. Once they're an adult, you cannot undo those advantages. So it's completely barking up the wrong tree. What we have to have is women's sport for people born female. FINA have said, right, women's sport for people who have not gone through male puberty, which effectively is kind of the same thing. So, yeah, I hope that the tide is now turning and more federations and governing bodies will will find their spines and stand up for female-only sport.
No, indeed, and we will keep speaking about it. By the way, I read your book, Marathon Wisdom, because do you know my proudest achievement in life was running the London Marathon in 2011.
Fantastic, good
do you
for you.
believe I could do it?
Of course, absolutely.
I mean, it was actually the most horrific thing I've ever done in my life. But I did it. I just wanted to do it once. And everyone said, oh, you'll become addicted. You'll want to do lots of them. And I was like, never again. Never again. But if I can do it, I feel like anyone can do it.
Yeah, anyone can do it. I mean, you know, the marathon is... It's perhaps a love or hate thing, you know. Some people absolutely love it, some people are less keen. But, you know, my book, I've tried to write it deliberately to make it accessible for everybody.
No, and it is. It is.
Including non-elite runners. So.
Which I'm certainly not. Mariam Ucci, great to see you, and we'll keep speaking, of course. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel return now. Dawn Neeson, who is your greatest Britain nominee?
Right, OK, following on from your conversation just now, I'm going to nominate the England team for bringing football home and ending 56 years of hurt. Well done, girls.
John Sargent, your greatest Britain nominee?
Greatest Britain. I wish I could pronounce his name properly, but I'll have a go. Nur-ul-Awazi Jilani. Now, in fact, I wish he was well known, because he is the surgeon that was in charge of the team that separated the 3-year-old Brazilian twins who had been joined at the head. And they worked for 27 hours on that one final operation, and he took just 4 15-minute breaks.
Oh my
He is
God.
a hero.
What a man. What a man. And Amy Nicole?
So my nominee this week is, I don't know whether it's an honorary nominee, but it's Big Brother, because it turns out he has been watching and he's coming back on ITV. The show is set to return and I can't wait.
Do you know what, John? You've made me feel so terrible because, of course, I know I should go for your incredible surgeon, who is amazing, but I just love Big Brother so much. I am so excited about the return of Big Brother. I can't help it. I've watched the show since the start. Anyone who knows me knows I've been obsessed with this show, so I'm delighted it's coming back. Dawn Neeson, your Union jackass.
Well, it's going to be you now, actually. It's honorary jackass is the German media, in particular the Bild, which is the German version of The Sun, for saying that the English Lionesses cheated at Wembley again, having a go at summarising...
Poor sports. Poor sports as ever.
Yes, absolutely.
John Sargent, your Union jackass nominee.
Jackass, Liz Truss, for the U-turn we've talked a lot about on public sector pay, and for making a very silly remark about let's ignore Nicola Sturgeon.
And Amy Nicole, your Union jackass nominee.
Well, everyone knows that BP has recorded record profits, but I just want to put that into perspective. It's £28 billion a year, which is more than most government department budgets, whilst most people expect petrol prices so high that they're considering it just abandoning their cars. They can't afford to get to work. So I think that is wrong and something needs to be done about it.
OK, well, I'm going to go with Dawn Neeson and the spoil sports and the German media who just couldn't accept the result and wanted to claim... What was it, Dawn? There was like a penalty that they were meant to have received.
Yeah, exactly. They said we cheated in the 25th minute when an alleged handball was denied. And they're comparing it to Jeff Hurst's ghost goal in 1966. Move on.
Dawn Neeson, John Sargent, Amy Nicole, fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much. Thank you for your company today. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headliners is up next, though. Good night.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Staying largely cloudy over the next 24 hours, breezy as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will continue to bring some warmth and humidity with it. Low pressure to the north and northwest of the UK at the moment. That's brought some rain and a lot of cloud in from the Atlantic during the last 24 hours. And over the next 24 hours, we'll continue to see largely cloudy skies and some rain, mostly northern and western England overnight, as well as parts of Wales, especially over the hills and coasts. Showers or even longer spells of rain pushing into the northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, spreading into other parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. A lot of cloud overnight and a continued breeze, so a mild, if rather muggy night to come, 15 to 18 Celsius fairly widely.